Hi, I'm John Hornick. Welcome to Chef's Apprentice, learning to cook like a pro, one small plate at a time. This lesson is the lamb chops master recipe. Here you will start to learn about lamb. Like pork, different cuts of lamb have different tastes and textures and are best cooked in different ways. My favorite cut is the rack, which can be served whole and carved at the table, or you can slice chops from the rack for small plates. The techniques unique to rack of lamb are Frenching, which means to scrape the ends of the rib bones clean so they look nice for presentation, searing and roasting the whole rack, and then carving it into chops. You will also make a persillade, which will insulate and protect the meat as it cooks. This preparation also calls for one of the great sauces of all times, Demiglace. Although this is a classic French sauce, it clearly has umami. You need to plan ahead to make Demiglace, as it takes many hours to make properly. I only make it a couple of times a year and freeze it into ice cube trays or other containers of various sizes, so I have it when I need it. Because this is a master recipe, you can follow it and make the lamb chops and substitute another sauce or butter if you have no demi on hand. Techniques today are Frenching of a rack of lamb, chopping, sweating and deglazing, seasoning, reducing, adjusting seasoning, mounting, keeping warm, making a sauce, making a persillade, searing, finishing in the oven or roasting, resting, slicing lamb racks, plating, and garnishing from on high. So let's start cooking. Okay, we're here to talk about the mise en place for lesson 45, the lamb chops master recipe. Of course, the star of this show is the lamb rack. Now, part of this presentation or part of this lesson is to French this rack of lamb, which means to take a paring knife and scrape the extra fat and meat bits off the ends of the ribs. But I realized that this rack that I bought was actually Frenched already. So that's already been done. And the point of that is to make the ribs look better for presentation. All right, so in addition to the lamb, you also need to have some olive oil. You need to have about a quarter cup of chopped shallots, about a quarter cup of chopped garlic. I think the description says to use 4 tablespoons, same thing as a quarter cup. We'll need to have 2 cups of red wine, a couple of sprigs of fresh thyme that have been tied together, makes them easier to find in the sauce later on. About 1 teaspoon of brown sugar, could be light or dark brown sugar. About a quarter of a cup of breadcrumbs. These happen to be seasoned breadcrumbs. You can use regular breadcrumbs, seasoned breadcrumbs, whatever you want. About a quarter of a cup of chopped parsley. About a quarter of a cup of Dijon mustard. We're going to need about 2 tablespoons of white wine. Now, I didn't have any open, so I'm going to use dry vermouth. Remember, you can always use dry vermouth in place of white wine. And for the 2 tablespoons, I'm just going to eyeball it when it comes time to use it. About 1 tablespoon of chopped sage. We'll need to have some kosher salt and our Peppermill, as we always do. And then we'll need to have about 1 ice cube's worth of Demiglace. Now, Demiglace is one of the world's great sauces. It's made from veal stock, which is then reduced to make a thicker, more unctuous sauce. And on my website, there's a stock chart that tells you how to make veal stock, and from the veal stock you make the Demiglace. And also there's a bonus lesson on how to make duck stock. Same process for making veal stock. Instead of using duck bones, you use veal bones. And then you can look at my website to see how to make the Demiglace from the veal stock. But also, I will be doing a bonus lesson on making Demiglace at some point in time. Okay, now, this is a master recipe, so if you don't have Demiglace, it takes several hours to make it. I make it once a year, and then I freeze it into ice cubes in various size containers, so I have it when I need it. If you don't have Demiglace handy, you could use butter instead. Use 2 tablespoons of butter in place of the ice cube of Demiglace. And of course, this is a master recipe, so you could really substitute any sauce that you want in place of using the sauce that's made in this master recipe. Okay, that's all the ingredients. We'll break now, come back, and I'll show you the equipment you need for lesson 45. All right, let's talk about the equipment we're going to need for lesson 45. We'll need a cutting board and a chef's knife. We'll also need a paring knife so that we can French that rack of lamb. One I have has already been Frenched. You use this knife to scrape the fat and the meat bits off the end of those rib bones. Also need a slicing knife to cut the chops at the end. We'll need a saucepan and spoon for making the sauce, and we will need a strainer and a clean saucepan to strain the sauce into. Need to have 2 mixing bowls and spoons for making the persillade and for making the mixture of mustard and white wine. Need to have a skillet. Skillet will be used to sear the lamb, and then we will need to have a sizzle plate to finish the lamb in the oven. Okay, that's all the equipment we need. We'll come back and we'll start cooking. Okay, the first thing on our prep list is to preheat the oven to 400 degrees, which we're going to do. And then the next thing is to sweat the shallots in about 2 tablespoons of olive oil. So I'm just going to eyeball that olive oil, about 2 tablespoons. Add the shallots to the pan. Put them on medium heat. And we're going to give them a little seasoning. Stir them up a bit. Okay, we're going to let those sweat. It's looking pretty good. Shallots are looking translucent. We're going to put in about half of the garlic that we have. And we're going to stir that and sweat it for about 30 seconds. Garlic will burn easily. You have to keep an eye on it, especially if your heat is above, say, low, for example. Okay, now we're going to deglaze with the red wine. Add the thyme. Stir it up. Now we're going to increase the heat because I want to reduce this 2 cups of wine down to, about a half a cup. Okay, so we've brought the wine to a boil. We're just going to let this boil like this. We're going to keep an eye on it and let it reduce. We want to get it down to between 1/4 and a half cup. Okay, it looks like we're down to half cup, maybe a little bit less than a half cup. So next step is to turn off the heat, and then we're going to strain that into a clean saucepan. And we're going to discard these solids. And what we're done is basically we've infused that wine with the flavor of the shallots and the garlic, and then we've reduced that wine so it's intensified the flavor. So let's try it. Good. I don't think it needs any additional salt or pepper. Now we're going to keep this warm until we're ready to serve. Okay, next step on our prep list is to make the persillade. So we're going to mix the breadcrumbs and the parsley, the remaining garlic, and some salt and some pepper. Then we want to add enough olive oil to make a wet paste. Kind of would have the consistency of applesauce. Well, that looks pretty good. It has kind of the consistency of a thicker applesauce, and there's enough oil in it that it's holding together as a paste. We're going to be smoothing that on top of the rack of lamb, and we want it to stick on there kind of like a paste would. Okay, next step is to mix the Dijon mustard with the white wine, although tonight we're using dry vermouth instead of white wine. You can use either one. Now the reason that we do this is we're going to smooth this this mustard onto the rack of lamb, and if we just try to smooth it on there as the mustard, it gets very pasty and it's more likely to burn. If we mix it with some white wine, it's less likely to burn and it's easier to smooth on. Good, so it's kind of soupy. That's how we want it. Okay, so I brought the lamb to room temperature about a half an hour ago. Now we're going to season the lamb with salt and pepper both sides. Next, we're going to coat the lamb with olive oil all over. All right, now it's time to sear the lamb. We're going to get the pan hot on, like medium to medium-high heat. And after the pan itself gets hot, we're going to put that lamb rack in there. All right, now the pan is hot. I can just see little whiffs of smoke coming off of it. We're going to put this rack in here first on the fat side down. Now you might have noticed I didn't put any fat in the pan. The reason is because the lamb itself has a fat cap, and then we put some olive oil on it. So I don't think there's any need to add fat to the pan. The fat on the fat cap is going to start to render and spread out in the pan, and that will help us when we turn the lamb over to do the loin side. So what we want to do is brown the lamb on both sides and on the ends. Okay, let's turn this over. Oh, beautiful. Beautiful sear, nice browning on the loin side. Now we're going to do, on the fat side. Now we're going to do a little sear on the other side as well. And let's see how it looks. Now the other side, we're only going to get the browning down here where the meat is. I also want to get a sear on the end. Good. Okay, now we'll put that on the sizzle plate and meet back at the board. Well, the next thing on our prep list is to coat the loin side with mustard. So we're going to coat the whole thing with mustard, and also to cover the mustard on the meat side, on the fat side I should say, with the persillade. So first we'll take the mustard mixture, and we were going to smear that all over the lamb on the ends as well. Flip it over. Now we want to mound the persillade on top. Okay, next step is to roast this lamb on the sizzle plate in the oven, which we preheated earlier to 400 degrees. And we're going to leave it in there for 25 minutes, and then we're going to check it. That should bring us to about medium. If you want medium rare, use less time. Okay, it's been 25 minutes. This is looking really nice. We're going to let this rest for about 7, 8 to 10 minutes, something like that, in a warm place. And while we do that, while it rests, we're going to come back to our sauce, but bring this up to medium heat. And then we're going to add to this sauce the brown sugar and the Demiglace. Remember, if you don't have Demiglace, use 2 tablespoons of cold butter. Now, when you swirl in a sauce like this Demiglace is kind of gelatinized because it was in the refrigerator for a while. You want to swirl it around. This is called mounting, especially if you're using butter. Mounting a sauce with butter means basically just put cold butter in there and swirl it around until it's mixed in and melted. Same thing if we're putting in this Demiglace. We just want to warm this up. We do not want to bring it to a boil. Everything's already cooked. There's no reason to boil anything. We've already reduced the wine. And then we'll give it a little taste. Let's turn that heat down some more. Excellent. Okay, now we're going to keep this in a warm place until it's time to serve. Turn the heat off. Okay, here's our rack. It's been in the oven at 400 degrees for 25 minutes, and then it's been resting for, about 10 minutes. So let's try slicing it and see what it looks like. Now, good way to slice lamb ribs is to hold them up in the air like this. Take your knife and run it down between the ribs, and then you can see the bones on the back. You want to carve around those bones. Sometimes it can be a little tough to find the right spot. All right, let's see what they look like. Oh, beautiful, medium rare. Okay, so we're gonna slice these into individual chops, and then we'll plate them up. Here we go. As I said, these are medium rare. If you like them to be more cooked, put them back in for a little bit longer, but these are perfect for me. Lamb can be served rare, medium rare, just like beef. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to plate 2 chops per dish. This is a small plate, remember. And then we want to drizzle a little bit of the sauce. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of raise the spoon up above it and drizzle a few drops down onto the plate, and then we'll garnish it with a little sage, twist of pepper, and there we have it. That's lesson 45, lamb chops master recipe. You can see photos of the finished dish at my Instagram, which is at Chef's Apprentice, Cook Like a Pro. Next up is daube of beef, which is basically pot roast, but it's the French version of pot roast. And please remember to subscribe to my channel, and thanks for watching.